What happens when a narcissist finally faces the one truth they can't escape? That they destroyed the only real love they ever had, the love of an empath. At first, they live in the illusion of control, thinking the empath will always forgive, always return, always carry the weight of the relationship. But one day, that silent shift happens. The empath stops explaining, stops chasing, and their absence becomes louder than words. That's the moment the narcissist begins to crack. They replay every memory, every argument, every cold word, realizing they pushed away the one person who loved them without conditions. And here's the cruel twist. They may never admit it to you, but inside, the breaking point comes with regret so deep, it haunts them. By the end of this video, you'll see exactly how that moment unfolds and why the empath's departure is the one loss a narcissist can never truly recover from. Stay with me until the end, and if you've ever felt this story in your own life, drop a comment below and share your voice. It might be the one that helps another empath break free. And don't forget to subscribe. You belong here. There comes a moment in every empath's journey with a narcissist that shifts everything. It is not loud, dramatic, or explosive. It does not look like the scenes people imagine, where doors are slammed and accusations are shouted. No, this moment arrives quietly, almost invisibly, but its power is unmatched. It is the silent awakening. The empath, after months or even years of explaining themselves, defending their intentions, and begging to be understood, suddenly realizes the truth. Nothing they say will ever be enough. No amount of reasoning, no depth of love, no clarity of words will ever penetrate the narcissist's walls. And in that moment, the empath stops. They stop explaining. They stop defending. They stop begging. The silence that follows is not weakness. It is liberation. At first, this awakening feels almost unreal. The empath, who has poured themselves out endlessly, feels a new stillness rising inside. The constant need to prove their heart begins to dissolve. The cycles of explaining, "I didn't mean it that way," or "I only wanted to help," or "I'm sorry if I hurt you," lose their grip. They understand now that the narcissist never sought understanding, only control. Every argument was never about truth, but about twisting reality to keep the empath trapped. And once the empath sees this, they can never unsee it. Their silence becomes their shield. This silence is not the cold shoulder or the silent treatment, the kind the narcissist uses to punish. No, this silence is sacred. It is the refusal to engage in a game that was never winnable. It is the quiet knowing that their energy is too precious to waste on endless battles that only drain the soul. For the narcissist, this silence feels threatening. They are used to the empath's voice filling the air, defending, explaining, pleading for peace. Without it, the narcissist is forced to face the emptiness of their own echo. They prod, they poke, they push harder, trying to ignite the old reactions, but the empath has stepped into a different state. They are no longer reacting, they are simply observing. The power of this awakening lies in its simplicity. The empath does not announce it. They do not send a warning or a declaration. They do not need to prove they are awake. They just are. The narcissist notices in subtle ways. The empath no longer flinches at accusations. They no longer rush to clarify every misunderstanding. They no longer fall apart under blame. Instead, they watch with calm eyes, knowing that the storm of manipulation is nothing more than noise. It is in this calm that the narcissist begins to unravel, because their control depended on the empath's reactions. Without reactions, their entire game collapses. For the empath, this awakening is both painful and empowering. Painful because they realize how long they lived in confusion, believing they could love someone into healing. Empowering because they finally see that love does not mean self-destruction. They understand now that stepping back is not cruelty, it is self-respect. Their silence is not abandonment, it is survival. And in this new strength, the empath begins to walk away, not always with their feet at first, but with their heart, their mind, and their spirit. The walking away is gradual. It begins internally. The empath's thoughts shift. Where they once replayed arguments, searching for the perfect response, they now let those thoughts go. Where they once doubted themselves endlessly, they now start to trust their own instincts. They realize that peace does not come from fixing someone else, it comes from protecting their own soul. This inner shift is invisible to the outside world, but inside the empath, it feels like breathing after years of suffocation. And eventually,
The walking away becomes external. The empath's actions change. They stop chasing. They stop reaching out first. They stop trying to repair what was never theirs to fix. They begin to reclaim their energy, their joy, their passions, the parts of themselves that were buried under the weight of manipulation. And one day, without needing to announce it, they are gone, physically, emotionally, spiritually free from the cycle. The narcissist may wake up to find the empath's body still present, but their spirit absent. Or, in time, they may wake up to find the empath's presence gone altogether. Either way, the silence leaves a hole the narcissist cannot fill. For the narcissist, this silent awakening is devastating. They depended on the empath's words, their energy, their attention. Even negative attention was fuel. But now, the empath gives them nothing. The silence is like a mirror the narcissist cannot look away from. It reflects their emptiness, their inability to connect, their failure to hold on to real love. And though they may scramble to regain control, using every tactic in their arsenal, the empath has already crossed a line. Once awakened, they cannot return to blindness. Once free, they cannot willingly step back into chains. The beauty of the empath's silent awakening is that it restores dignity. For so long, the empath may have felt small, broken, or powerless under the weight of manipulation. But in silence, they rediscover their strength. They realize they do not need to win arguments, prove their worth, or fight for validation. They are worthy simply because they exist. Their voice, once drowned in chaos, now carries weight in its quietness. Their absence, once unthinkable, now becomes their greatest act of power. And in the end, the silent awakening is not just about leaving the narcissist. It is about returning to themselves. It is about remembering who they were before the manipulation and who they are destined to become after. It is the breaking of chains, the reclaiming of light, and the quiet, unstoppable rise of a soul that has endured and survived. The empath's silent awakening is not the end of their story. It is the beginning of their freedom. It is the moment the cycle ends, the illusion crumbles, and truth takes its rightful place. And while the narcissist is left to wrestle with the emptiness of a love they destroyed, the empath walks forward with strength, with dignity, and with the kind of peace that can never again be stolen.
When the empath finally walks away, something happens that the narcissist never prepared for. At first, they might feel confident, even arrogant, believing they can replace the empath with ease. They convince themselves that new admirers will come quickly, that attention will flow endlessly, and that the world is full of people willing to adore them. For a time, it may even look that way. They might surround themselves with shallow connections, flirtations, or distractions. But beneath the surface, something gnaws at them. A quiet emptiness begins to grow, and it grows deeper with each passing day. Because what they lost was not just another person, it was the empath. And the love of an empath is not something that can be replaced. The empath's love is different. It is not transactional. It is not conditional. It is not based on appearances or shallow needs. It is deep, unconditional, and patient. It sees beyond flaws and reaches into the hidden places of another person's soul. The empath gives in a way that most people cannot, because their heart is wired for compassion. They do not just care, they understand. They do not just forgive, they embrace. They do not just love on the surface, they love in a way that heals wounds invisible to the eye. And once a narcissist has been touched by this kind of love,
No substitute will ever feel the same. This is where the void begins. Other people may admire the narcissist, but admiration is shallow. Other people may desire them, but desire is temporary. The empath offered something far deeper: acceptance. Real, unwavering acceptance. Even when the narcissist was at their worst, the empath saw their humanity. Even when they were cruel, the empath tried to understand. Even when they pushed love away, the empath held on, believing in the possibility of change. This is not the kind of love the narcissist will find in casual flings or fleeting attention. And when they realize this, the emptiness inside them begins to echo. At first, the narcissist might fight the void. They might try to drown it out with distractions, new relationships, new conquests, new sources of admiration. But every attempt only reminds them of what is missing. The new people in their life may offer excitement, but not depth. They may offer attention, but not devotion. They may offer presence, but not understanding. The narcissist finds themselves comparing, replaying memories of the empath's patience, their kindness, their unwavering loyalty. No matter how much they try to deny it, nothing feels the same. The tragedy is that the narcissist does not realize the rarity of the empath's love until it is gone. During the relationship, they took it for granted. They saw the empath's forgiveness as weakness, their loyalty as dependency, their love as something that would never end. They believed they could push as far as they wanted without consequence. But once the empath leaves, reality sets in. The love they destroyed was not common, not replaceable, not something they can ever reclaim. And in that realization, the void grows heavier. For the empath, leaving was about survival. For the narcissist, being left is about exposure. They are exposed to their own emptiness, their inability to connect deeply, their lack of true intimacy. And though they may never admit it to anyone else, inside they are haunted. They replay the moments they dismissed, the nights they pushed a love away, the mornings they chose control over closeness. They begin to feel the weight of their own choices pressing in on them. The void is not just the absence of the empath, it is the presence of regret. This emptiness cannot be filled by power, status, or admiration. It cannot be filled by moving on quickly to someone else. Because no matter how many people come into their lives, the narcissist knows deep down that none of them will offer the same purity of love that the empath did. Others may play along with their games, but they will not endure the storms the way the empath did. Others may admire the mask, but they will not see through to the core the way the empath did. Others may stay for a time, but they will not sacrifice their soul the way the empath once did. The narcissist learns, too late, that they lost something sacred. And here lies the cruel irony. The empath's love was never about control. It was freely given, without condition, without agenda. The narcissist, blinded by their obsession with power, believed love was something to dominate. But once the empath is gone, they see that real love cannot be forced. It can only be cherished. They realize that the empath's presence was not weakness, but strength, not dependency, but devotion. And that realization cuts deeper than any confrontation ever could. The void no one else can fill becomes a mirror. It forces the narcissist to see what they are missing, not just from the empath, but from themselves. They cannot create the depth the empath gave because they don't carry it within. They cannot replicate the compassion because they never cultivated it. They cannot generate the unconditional acceptance because their love has always come with conditions. And so they are left with emptiness, haunted by the truth that they destroyed the one bond that was real. For the empath, the story is different. Once they leave, they step into healing. The love they gave was genuine, and though it was wasted on someone who did not honor it, that love does not die. It remains within them, ready to be shared with those who are worthy. The empath learns that their love is not the problem. It was simply given to the wrong person. And in this healing, they reclaim themselves. They realize that the void the narcissist feels is not theirs to carry. They gave their best, and now they are free to give it to themselves, and eventually to someone who will treasure it. The narcissist, however, cannot escape the void. It lingers, it grows, it reminds them day after day that they let something priceless slip away. They may never admit it, but they know. The empath's love was the only real love they ever had. And once lost, it cannot be replaced, not in this lifetime.
For as long as anyone can remember, the narcissist wears a mask. It is polished, convincing, and carefully designed to fool the world. To strangers, they appear confident, charming, untouchable. To those who get closer, they present themselves as powerful, successful, or even misunderstood geniuses. And to the empath, at the beginning, they appear as the perfect partner, attentive, passionate, and full of promise. This mask is their greatest weapon. It hides the emptiness inside and creates the illusion that they are whole, secure, and in control. But masks are not made of steel. They are fragile, and eventually they crack. The cracks begin subtly, long before the narcissist even notices. The empath may be the first to see them. A moment of rage that doesn't match the situation. A lie that doesn't add up. A sudden shift in energy when admiration isn't given quickly enough. These cracks are glimpses into the truth beneath the mask. Insecurity, fear, and a deep hunger for validation that can never be satisfied. The narcissist spends their life patching these cracks with charm, manipulation, and control, but the mask is never flawless. And when the empath finally walks away, the mask does more than crack. It begins to shatter. The unraveling starts with silence. The narcissist, used to the empath's endless explanations, defenses, and forgiveness, suddenly receives nothing. No words, no reactions, no attempts to fix the chaos. At first, they laugh it off, convinced that the empath will return. They wear their mask a little tighter, showing the world that they are unaffected. They post their victories, flaunt their distractions, and pretend they are happier than ever. But behind closed doors, something begins to break. The mask no longer feels secure. It no longer fits the way it once did, and the narcissist begins to panic. The false confidence they relied on for years starts to slip. They try to repeat their old tricks, love bombing, guilt tripping, anger, or even tears. But this time, the empath is no longer responding. The control is gone. The supply is cut off. The games fall flat, and the narcissist is forced to confront a truth they never wanted to face. The mask cannot bring back what they have lost. The deeper the realization sinks in, the more the cracks widen. The confidence that once seemed unshakable turns into desperation. The arrogance that once carried them now feels hollow. They look into the mirror and no longer see the powerful image they built for the world. They see themselves, exposed, fragile, and terrified. Without the empath to feed their image, the mask begins to collapse completely. This unraveling terrifies the narcissist because their identity has always been tied to the mask. They never built a true self. They never nurtured their inner world. They only built layers of illusion to hide their emptiness. And now, without the empath's energy to hold it together, those illusions collapse. The mask no longer protects them. It exposes them. The world may not see the cracks immediately. The narcissist will still try to appear strong, but inside they are crumbling. The empath's absence echoes in ways they cannot silence. Every distraction, every shallow connection, every attempt to prove they are fine only deepens their awareness that they are not. They remember the depth of the empath's love, the way it grounded them, the way it made them feel more than just a hollow shell. And they realize, though they will rarely admit it, that they destroyed the only person who saw beyond the mask and still loved them. For the empath, the cracked mask is a confirmation. They finally see the truth clearly. The person they loved was never real. The charm, the promises, the confidence, it was all a performance, carefully staged to keep them hooked. And now, with the mask breaking apart, they understand why nothing ever made sense. They realized that the love they gave was poured into a costume, not a soul. And this realization, though painful, is freeing. For the narcissist, however, the cracked mask is torment. They cannot rebuild what has been destroyed. They can patch the pieces temporarily, finding new admirers to believe in their performance, but the cracks will always remain. Deep down, they know the truth. They lost control. They lost the one who saw through the act. And worst of all, they lost the one who still loved them despite the act. That knowledge eats at them, haunting them in moments of silence. The unraveling of false confidence is not just the loss of the empath, it is the loss of the illusion itself. The narcissist is left with the one thing they cannot bear, themselves. No mask to hide behind, no audience to cheer them on, no empath to carry their weight. Just emptiness, just regret. Just the haunting reality that their mask, no matter how carefully crafted, could never protect them from the truth.
The weight of regret is a burden the narcissist never expected to carry, because for so long they believed they were untouchable. They thought love was an endless resource that could be drained, twisted, and manipulated without ever truly running out. They assumed the empath's devotion was permanent, as if unconditional love meant unconditional tolerance. But when that love is finally gone, when the empath no longer bends or pleads, the narcissist faces something they never prepared for, a silence that echoes louder than any argument. At first, they may pretend not to notice. They may distract themselves with new admirers, temporary conquests, or shallow connections that seem to confirm their charm still works. Yet deep inside, something unsettles them. The validation that once flowed so easily no longer fills the same void, because what they lost wasn't just attention, it was real, unselfish love. And the narcissist knows, even if they try to deny it, that they are the reason it's gone. Regret for a narcissist doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in slowly in quiet moments they cannot control. Perhaps it's late at night, when the noise of the world dies down and they are left alone with their thoughts. They remember the way the empath's love once felt, safe, unwavering, forgiving. They remember the patience, the kindness, the steady presence that never demanded perfection, only honesty. And then, like a cruel reminder, they realize they traded it all for power games, for manipulation, for shallow victories that now mean nothing. This is the torment, knowing they had what most people search for their whole lives, and they destroyed it with their own hands. Unlike the empath, who can heal and rebuild, the narcissist struggles to replace what was lost, because deep down they know there is no substitute for genuine love. The weight grows heavier when they begin to see the empath thriving without them. Nothing pierces a narcissist more than realizing their absence was not the end of the empath's world. They expected to be irreplaceable, the center of gravity that the empath would always orbit. Instead, they watched the empath reclaim their joy, rebuild their strength, and step into freedom with a glow that was once dimmed by the relationship. And while the empath may still carry scars, those scars become symbols of survival, proof of resilience. The narcissist, on the other hand, is left with emptiness. Their mask of control begins to crack under the strain of regret because no matter how many faces they charm, no matter how many temporary highs they chase, the truth follows them. They destroyed the only genuine bond they ever had. Regret becomes a shadow that clings to every new connection. They may find someone new, but it never feels the same. The laughter doesn't echo as warmly. The intimacy doesn't cut as deeply. The trust doesn't come as freely. In fact, every new partner only reminds them of the one that got away, the empath who loved them without conditions. It is not just the loss of a person, it is the loss of a version of themselves they could have been. With the empath, they had the chance to grow, to evolve, to shed their toxic patterns and step into something real. But instead of choosing growth, they chose destruction. That realization becomes unbearable when they see how life might have been different if only they had valued what was in front of them. The heaviest part of regret is knowing the door is closed. Narcissists are used to recycling people, to discarding and returning at will, confident the other person will always let them back in. But the empath's awakening changes that pattern forever. Once the empath truly sees, once they accept the truth of what the narcissist is, the spell is broken. No amount of pleading, manipulation, or charm can rebuild what was destroyed. And for the narcissist, this is a nightmare, because they realize they no longer have control over the one person who gave them real love. That power is gone, and with it, a piece of their identity crumbles. This regret is not like ordinary sadness. It is corrosive, because it eats away at the illusion they built for themselves. For years, they convinced themselves they didn't need real love, that manipulation and dominance were enough. But the loss of the empath exposes the hollowness of that belief. Now they are forced to confront the reality. Love was the one thing that could have filled the void inside them, and they destroyed it. They stand at the ruins of what they created, haunted by the fact that it was never the empath's failure. It was theirs. And so the weight of regret becomes their silent punishment. While the empath heals, grows, and rises, the narcissist remains trapped in the prison of their own choices. They may never admit it out loud, but deep inside, they know the truth. They didn't just lose love. They lost the only person who ever saw their soul beneath the mask and still chose to love them. And nothing, no game, no distraction, no new admirer can ever erase the torment of that truth.
There comes a time in every empath's journey when pain becomes the very soil from which strength is born. At first, the relationship with the narcissist feels like a storm that never ends. waves of confusion, manipulation, and heartache crashing over them day after day. The empath bends, they sacrifice, they give everything of themselves, believing that love can heal even the darkest wounds. But after the storm clears, something remarkable happens. The empath discovers that the very fire meant to break them has instead reforged them into someone stronger than they ever imagined. This transformation is not sudden, nor is it easy. It begins quietly, in the moments of silence after the arguments, in the reflection that follows the endless cycles of gaslighting and betrayal. The empath realizes they are no longer the same person who once begged to be understood. They no longer crave validation from someone who could never truly see them. This realization is the seed of transformation, and once it takes root, the empath begins to grow in ways the narcissist never anticipated. The empath's transformation begins with awareness. They begin to see the patterns not as accidents, but as tactics. They start recognizing the subtle lies, the manipulative games, the way the narcissist's love always came with strings attached. This awareness is painful at first because it forces the empath to face the truth that the person they loved was never capable of giving the same depth of love in return. But instead of crushing them, this truth frees them. Awareness becomes the light that guides them out of the darkness, step by step. The empath learns to detach, not from love itself, but from the illusion that love means tolerating abuse. With awareness comes boundaries. This is perhaps the greatest shift in the empath's journey. For so long, they gave without limits, believing that selflessness was the highest form of love. But now they understand that real love also honors the self. The empath learns to say no without guilt, to step away without apology, to protect their own energy as fiercely as they once protected others. Boundaries become their shield, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. They no longer accept crumbs of affection or half-hearted promises. They no longer trade their peace for the hope of temporary approval. And in this newfound strength, the empath discovers a power they never knew they had, the power to walk away and never look back. The transformation also awakens resilience. Surviving a narcissist is not just about ending a relationship, it's about rebuilding an entire sense of self. The empath must rediscover who they are without the constant criticism, without the manipulation, without the voice of the narcissist echoing in their mind. This process is slow, but it is also profound. Piece by piece, the empath reclaims themselves, their laughter, their creativity, their passions, their dreams. What was once suppressed under the weight of control now rises to the surface, brighter and more alive than before. They begin to live for themselves, not through the lens of someone else's approval. They realize their worth is not measured by how much pain they can endure, but by the light they carry within. In this transformation, forgiveness plays a surprising role. Not the kind of forgiveness that excuses the narcissist's actions, but the kind that releases the empath from carrying the poison of resentment. They realize holding on to anger only keeps them tied to the very person who hurt them. True freedom comes when they let go, not to heal the narcissist, but to heal themselves. Forgiveness in this sense is not a gift to the narcissist, but a liberation for the empath. It allows them to step into their future without chains, to live without constantly reliving the past. The empath's transformation is also spiritual in nature. Many empaths describe a deeper connection to faith, to intuition, or to a higher purpose after surviving such darkness. They realize that their sensitivity, once seen as a weakness, is actually their greatest strength.
It allows them to feel deeply, to connect authentically, to love with purity, but now with wisdom guiding that love. They understand that their journey had meaning, even in the suffering, because it awakened them to their own strength and calling. What was meant to break them instead became the path to their awakening. This transformation terrifies the narcissist. Once they thrived on the empath's dependency, on the constant supply of attention and forgiveness. But now the empath has become unshakable. No amount of guilt-tripping, silent treatment, or false promises can pull them back into the cycle. The empath has risen above the manipulation, and the narcissist can no longer reach them in the same way. This loss of control is the narcissist's greatest fear, but it is the empath's greatest triumph. For the first time, the empath truly stands in their own power. And yet this transformation is not about becoming hardened or bitter. The empath does not lose their capacity to love. They refine it. They become more discerning about who deserves their energy, more intentional about where they pour their compassion. They continue to love, but no longer at the expense of themselves. Their love becomes wiser, stronger, and even more radiant because it is rooted in self-respect. This is the ultimate transformation, from someone who once lost themselves in another's darkness to someone who now shines so brightly that darkness can no longer consume them. In the end, the empath's transformation is the story of rising from ashes. It is proof that even the deepest wounds can give birth to unshakable strength. The empath emerges not as a victim, not even as a survivor, but as a warrior of light, wiser, braver, and more powerful than they ever thought possible. Their scars become their armor, their pain becomes their wisdom, and their heart becomes a beacon of hope for others who are still lost in the storm.
Love and control cannot live in the same place. One feeds, nurtures, and expands, while the other suffocates, restricts, and destroys. This is the tragedy of the narcissist's choice. They are offered real intimacy, true connection, and unconditional love from the empath, yet instead of cherishing it, they trade it away for the shallow thrill of control. And in that decision, they lose everything that could have healed their brokenness. For the empath, love is simple. It is about giving without keeping score, listening without judgment, and standing by someone even in their darkest hours. The empath sees the pain behind the narcissist's mask. They notice the fragility hiding beneath the arrogance, the fear behind the cruelty, and with their deep compassion, they extend love again and again, believing that patience and kindness will eventually break through the narcissist's walls. But for the narcissist, love feels dangerous. Genuine intimacy threatens their carefully built facade. To be truly loved means to be truly seen, and to be truly seen means to expose the wounds they've spent a lifetime hiding. That is why, instead of opening themselves, narcissists tighten their grip on control. They play games, twist words, withhold affection, and push boundaries. In their mind, control feels safer than love, because love requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is what they fear the most. At first, the empath may not even notice the trap. They excuse the mood swings, the silent treatments, the manipulations. They tell themselves, this person is hurting. They just need more love. And so they give more. They forgive more. They sacrifice more. They believe love can heal. But slowly, the balance tips. What began as love
starts to feel like walking on eggshells, giving without receiving, carrying the weight of two hearts alone. And here lies the tragedy. The narcissist doesn't see this devotion as sacred. They see it as power. They interpret unconditional love as endless supply, proof that they can push, test, and demand without consequence. Each act of kindness becomes a resource to exploit. Each forgiving gesture becomes permission to continue. In the end, the narcissist mistakes love for weakness, never realizing that it was the strongest gift they were ever given. But control has an expiration date. There comes a moment when the empath, exhausted and drained, awakens. They see the pattern clearly. They recognize that their love is not being honored, but consumed. And in that awakening, the empath chooses distance over devotion. They stop chasing, stop fixing, stop explaining. They simply walk away. For the narcissist, this is unthinkable. In their world, people don't leave. People orbit around their ego, endlessly supplying validation. But when the empath finally withdraws, something shatters. The power games no longer work. The silent treatments fall flat. The manipulations echo in an empty room. And suddenly, the narcissist is forced to confront a truth they never prepared for. Control can win battles, but it can never replace love. It is then that regret seeps in, because no amount of control fills the void left by genuine intimacy. No victory in manipulation compares to the warmth of someone who cared unconditionally. No dominance can silence the ache of knowing they had something real and destroyed it. The narcissist may try to replace it with new supply, but nothing tastes the same, because what they lost was rare. What they lost was irreplaceable. The empath, on the other hand, does not leave empty. Though wounded, though scarred, they transform. They learn that love without respect is not love at all. They learn that giving endlessly to someone who only takes is self-destruction, not devotion. And most importantly, they learn their own worth. From this pain, the empath rises stronger, wiser, unshakable. Their love does not die, it grows, but now with boundaries, with clarity, with self-respect. The narcissist, however, remains trapped. Their addiction to control blinds them to the beauty of true connection. They could have chosen intimacy. They could have chosen to drop the mask, to let themselves be healed by the love they were given. But instead, they chose control. And in choosing control, they lost everything. This is the tragedy of the narcissist. They never realized that love was the real power all along.
The journey of the narcissist always seems powerful on the surface. They appear to have it all: the charm, the attention, the circle of admirers, and the ability to draw people in with their charisma. For a while, it works. They collect people like trophies, each one serving a purpose, each one adding to their inflated image of self-importance. But beneath all the noise, there's a truth they desperately avoid. None of those connections are real. None of them carry the same weight, the same depth, the same purity that the empath once gave them. And eventually, no matter how much they try to ignore it, this truth crashes down on them with crushing force. The empath was never just another person in their orbit. The empath was the one who saw their brokenness and loved them anyway. the one who stayed during storms, who listened when no one else did, who believed in the tiny fragments of goodness buried inside the narcissist's chaos. That love was deep, unconditional, and rare, something the narcissist didn't even know how to value until it was gone. When the empath finally walks away, it doesn't just leave a gap, it leaves a wound, a void so vast that no one else can fill it. At first, the narcissist pretends not to care. They smirk, they shrug, they go back to their games, telling themselves they'll find someone else, someone better, someone easier to control. And they do find others, plenty of others. But here's the tragedy. Every new connection feels hollow compared to what they lost. No one else listens with that kind of patience. No one else forgives with that kind of grace. No one else loves them without strings attached. And the narcissist starts to feel the emptiness growing louder inside them. Slowly, isolation begins to creep in. It's not the physical isolation of being alone in a room. No, it's much deeper. It's the kind of isolation where you can be surrounded by people, laughing and talking, yet feel a deep loneliness pressing against your chest. The narcissist starts to notice it in the quiet moments, when the phone stops buzzing, when the admirers move on, when the thrill of conquest fades too quickly. They're left with shallow echoes of what used to be real, and in those moments, regret seeps in like poison. This isolation is the direct result of their choices. Narcissists push away the very people who care most about them. They sabotage intimacy because control feels safer than vulnerability. They choose games instead of honesty, power instead of partnership. But the price of those choices is steep. The more they manipulate, the more they lie, the more they use people as pawns, the less capable they become of forming anything real. Until one day, they wake up and realize they are surrounded, but not connected, admired, but not loved, wanted, but not understood. The empath, meanwhile, is no longer there to soften their edges, no longer there to anchor them with genuine love. And that's when the narcissist feels the sting of isolation most sharply. They remember how the empath used to stand by them even in their worst moments. They remember how the empath's love felt like home, a place they could always return to, no matter how much damage they caused. Now, that home is gone, and they can never get it back. This realization cracks something inside them. The mask they wore, the one of confidence, superiority, control, begins to slip. Behind it is someone desperately afraid of being alone, someone who has spent their whole life avoiding their own emptiness. But now, with the empath gone, there's no distraction powerful enough to hide it. The silence becomes unbearable. The relationships they try to replace the empath with all feel temporary, shallow, and meaningless. And no matter how hard they try, they cannot recreate what they destroyed. Isolation is the narcissist's final punishment. It doesn't come suddenly. It creeps in slowly, like shadows stretching across the room at sunset. First, it's just a faint awareness that something is missing. Then it grows into frustration. Why doesn't anyone love me the way the empath did? Why doesn't anyone stay the way they stayed? And finally, it becomes despair. The acceptance that they had something rare, something pure, and their own hands destroyed it. For the empath, this isolation of the narcissist isn't cruelty, it's justice. It's life teaching a lesson the empath never could. The empath walked away not to punish, but to survive. And in their absence, the narcissist is forced to sit with the very emptiness they always tried to project onto others. That emptiness is their mirror, reflecting the truth they've run from their entire lives. Control can never replace love, and manipulation can never substitute connection.
This realization cracks something inside them. The mask they wore, the one of confidence, superiority, control, begins to slip. Behind it is someone desperately afraid of being alone. Someone who has spent their whole life avoiding their own emptiness. But now, with the empath gone, there's no distraction powerful enough to hide it. The silence becomes unbearable. The relationships they try to replace the empath with all feel temporary, shallow, and meaningless. And no matter how hard they try, they cannot recreate what they destroyed. Isolation is the narcissist's final punishment. It doesn't come suddenly. It creeps in slowly, like shadows stretching across the room at sunset. First, it's just a faint awareness that something is missing. Then it grows into frustration. Why doesn't anyone love me the way the empath did? Why doesn't anyone stay the way they stayed? And finally, it becomes despair. The acceptance that they had something rare, something pure, and their own hands destroyed it. For the empath, this isolation of the narcissist isn't cruelty, it's justice. It's life teaching a lesson the empath never could. The empath walked away, not to punish, but to survive. And in their absence, the narcissist is forced to sit with the very emptiness they always tried to project onto others. That emptiness is their mirror, reflecting the truth they've run from their entire lives. Control can never replace love, and manipulation can never substitute connection. And here's the deepest irony. The empath, once broken, once drained, once doubting themselves, rises from the ashes stronger than ever. They rebuild their spirit, reclaim their peace, and discover that the love they once poured into the narcissist now belongs to themselves. While the narcissist sinks into isolation, the empath steps into freedom. One is left surrounded by shallow echoes. The other walks into depth, healing, and a life filled with real, meaningful connections. In the end, the narcissist's isolation isn't just about losing the empath. It's about losing themselves. Because when the empath leaves, they take with them the last true reflection of the narcissist's humanity. And without it, the narcissist is left staring into a void no one else can fill, no matter how many masks they wear or how many people they chase. It is the moment where power games collapse and the truth becomes undeniable. Love is irreplaceable, and once lost, it leaves behind an isolation that nothing in this world can heal. The empath's greatest victory doesn't come through words, shouting, or even exposing the narcissist's lies. It comes in silence. It is in the absence of their presence, their love, and their forgiveness that the narcissist feels the deepest wound. For so long, the empath may have tried to reason, to explain, to beg for honesty, and to fight for the bond they thought was real. But once they reach that sacred moment of awareness, when they realize nothing they say will ever change a person who thrives on control, they stop speaking altogether. The silence becomes their shield, their declaration of strength, and the echo that follows the narcissist everywhere they go. The narcissist, who once fed on the empath's endless compassion, suddenly finds themselves cut off from the very supply that kept their false sense of power alive. They hear the silence in every unanswered call, every unopened message, and every quiet day that passes without the empath's presence. To the narcissist, it is unbearable, not because they miss love in its purest form, but because they can no longer manipulate or dominate the person who once gave them everything. And this is where the haunting begins.
The hardest lessons in life are often the ones we realize too late. For the narcissist, that lesson comes wrapped in the quiet but undeniable truth: love cannot be replaced, imitated, or controlled. For so long they believed they held the upper hand. They thought the empath's devotion was a given, something permanent, something that could be taken for granted. But the day always comes when that illusion shatters. And when it does, the narcissist is left with an emptiness they can no longer outrun. The empath's love was never ordinary. It was patient when it should have given up. It was forgiving when most people would have walked away. It was unconditional in a way that mirrored the purest form of care. But the narcissist, blind in their pride and obsessed with control, mistook that love as weakness. They believed it was endless, that no matter how many betrayals, lies, or manipulations, the empath would stay. But even the purest heart reaches a breaking point. Even the most giving soul eventually understands that love is not supposed to destroy. And when the empath finally chooses themselves, the narcissist loses everything they never thought they could lose. It is only then that regret sets in. But regret is not the same as change. Regret is a shadow that follows the narcissist, whispering reminders of what they threw away. At first, they may try to replace the empath, moving from one shallow connection to another, convinced they can fill the void with distraction. But over time, they realize the truth. No one else loves like the empath did. No one else sees past the mask, touches the hidden wounds, or loves without condition. Every new connection feels temporary, hollow, transactional. The narcissist's mask cracks under the weight of its own emptiness. And here lies the deepest irony. The empath, once broken, does not remain broken. Walking away was never about revenge. It was about survival, about reclaiming their worth. The narcissist, however, becomes the one haunted. They sit with the weight of what they destroyed, knowing they cannot return to what once was. They may replay old conversations, old moments, wondering why they pushed so hard, why they chose ego over intimacy, why they gambled with the one love that would have never betrayed them. But there are no second chances. The empath in their silence speaks volumes. They do not go back, because they understand now. They see how costly it was to love someone who thrived on control. They see how much of themselves they sacrificed to keep something alive that was never mutual. And so they keep moving forward. With each step, they heal. With each day, they grow stronger, wiser, and freer. The lesson for them is liberation. The lesson for the narcissist is loss. This is the universal truth. People never value what they believe will always be there. But when it's gone, when the door closes for the last time, they are forced to face themselves. For the narcissist, this is unbearable, because facing themselves means confronting the truth they have avoided their entire lives. The truth that they are not invincible. The truth that their games cost them real love. The truth that they are alone, not because the world abandoned them, but because they destroyed the one bond that could have saved them from themselves. And so the story ends the way it always does. The empath, once underestimated, rises. The narcissist, once arrogant, mourns. Love, in the end, reveals its power not in clinging, not in begging, not in fighting, but in walking away. Because sometimes the greatest act of love is not staying, it's leaving. And the narcissist will remember again and again that the empath's love was the rarest gift they ever received. But by the time they realize it, it's gone forever, and the empath never looks back.